So tonight we're going to talk about Streamlit. And have have you guys used Streamlit? It seemed I haven't used it until about 2 months ago, and then I started using it just for some little projects, and then I had a bigger project that I could use it on, and got to deep got to do a deep dive into it and found some weaknesses and some kind of weird things about it. But overall, it's amazing for prototyping and amazing for getting something really quickly built. So what's kind of like your experience with it? If you guys have a lot of experience, and you see that I'm kind of saying something, or just if you want to interject and add to it, just please go ahead. So, okay. So what I wanted to show tonight is an app that I've built, and so just kind of like to get started with it is you you install it as a regular Python library with pip. So pip installs Streamlit, and then just like they're showing here, is just an import Streamlit in your code, and you just start building from there. And to run the application, it's very simple. You go in the directory where you have your file, and you're doing Streamlit run and the file name for the file that you're running. In here, my file is brands.py. So, and yeah, Streamlit.
Hey, Anton, can you increase the font size on your terminal window hugely?
Right. How do I do it? There we go. It worked. So basically, Streamlit run, and you pass the file. Right? So what's happening? Okay, let's try this again. Of course, when you're trying to do some live coding, everything goes to hell. Okay, so if you're familiar with Jupyter Notebook, it just kind of the same way launches on localhost, and it actually works on a local network as well. So you can access this from any machine on the local network. So this is the application that I built, which is an interface to a data set, a CSV file. So it's a company that runs a directory for fashion brands, and they wanted to be able to actually verify all the information that they have and have a way to really easily go through the data and do modifications, changes, and everything. So just to kind of show you what the app is doing is loading a CSV file. And this is kind of like still a development version of it. So loads a CSV file. In here, it shows me how many rows and columns does it have within. And this is the record that it's on. And then here I have some functionality that I'm going to go over in a little bit. And in the center, I have basically the data set. So the title, subtitle, descriptions, description from Facebook, LinkedIn, kind of pricing, year, employees, address. So all these data points that they are kind of interested in for the directory. And it's basically just I'm using Streamlit here as an interface, right? So they have a screenshot image for the thing, a logo, and also in here Streamlit allows you to basically almost show like a data frame, almost like an Excel spreadsheet. They also have the option to actually edit right in here, and you can save it. I just didn't implement it for this version because this is just something to really quickly visualize the data set, right? While you're still working in the app, and it's mostly for development. Then on this other side here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the session state a little bit later, is basically this is all the data that is in a way cached as a session. So while we were for this record, this is all the information for that record. The moment we move to the next record, right, the data changes and the data within the session state object changes as well, right? So, okay, takes a little while to run. So the nice thing about it is that if you see it up top in here, in the top right corner, it shows that it's running. So it's currently processing something. I'm not entirely sure why it should not be doing that. So try to run it again. Of course, when you're doing live presentations, let me try killing it and restarted it. Okay. This is one of the things that sometimes I've noticed that it's not as stable as you would like to be, and especially when there's a lot of data involved. Okay, I'm just gonna kill it fully. Not entirely sure what happened. So let me try to restart.
This is the part of the presentation that makes me feel better.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always like that. It's always like that. And okay. So let's see, launching it again. Okay. All right, now it's running. So not entirely sure what happened there, but yeah, so that's basically just what's happening here. So I was saying that this is a tool for their people to be able to actually quickly verify the data and add more data and work with web pages and other things. So one other thing that happens behind the scenes that I didn't show yet is it's whenever I launch the app, it's launching this browser that it's run through, oh my God, I have a lapsus, through Selenium WebDriver. Couldn't think of it. So it's running through Selenium WebDriver. So now when I'm running, that's what I was saying. On this side, on the sidebar here, I have all these buttons that allow me to really quickly go and check the websites and everything. So for now, for example, on this one, I want to launch the website, just automatically takes you to their website. So they can verify, hey, the website is right, the screenshot looks fine. If they don't like the screenshot, they can get a new screenshot. So when they get a new screenshot, it's loaded and saved, and you could see it here updated on the side. Also, if they don't have the logo, they can figure it out, which just basically inspect and get the logo URL from here, and then paste it in here and update that data. and then the same thing, they can go and verify some of this data. Now, the same thing, they were looking for information about the company, so they wanted to be able to see the about URL and the contact URL for that company. So, or sorry, here, about URL and the contact URL. So I have this, well, that's actually in a newer version where I have it working with the contact and the about. Here is just the data. But for this one, I have this, or no, in here just to save it, sorry. Save about, save contact, where you can actually find, let's say this is the, okay, this is the about URL. So you can go in there, and if you say save the about page URL, it's gonna go pull the URL from the browser and store it to the database, right? So right now it's actually storing to a CSV, but it can be modified to work with any database, basically. So let me see where the other window is. There we go. Okay. Right. So that was for that. The other part that I have is like the Facebook login and LinkedIn login to be able to actually just see the page, scrape the data from the page if needed, and just kind of fill up the information. So that's basically the functionality of the app. So I'm using Streamlit just as like a interface for the data set. So rather than them being into an Excel spreadsheet and just kind of trying to find information, copy paste into that Excel spreadsheet, it's a lot easier to have all this information in a UI. So from that standpoint, it's just Streamlit works quite amazingly. And there's this other YouTube video that I found where this guy is doing it specifically for data science and works the same way. Through a database, allows you to filter, allows you to do all these graphs and everything on the fly. So I'm gonna put this link in the notes in the comments for tonight's meeting. So this is quite an amazing one, quite an amazing presentation as well. So, okay. So now, kind of like that you guys understand what's happening with the app, we can look a little bit at the code. So you'll see that I have about 600 lines of code here, but most of it is for that functionality. How do I zoom in? Is it Pro Plus? Yeah, okay. So a lot of it is just for the extra functionality, right? So once I'm kind of closing all this extra functionality, let me just zoom up. So okay, session state, let me see. So basically, we're talking about what, about 30 lines of code here and till about here. So let's say 422 to 322. So the actual Streamlit functionality to display all the data and allow you to work with most of it is about 100 lines of code. And it still has kind of like quite an intricate amount of fields and types of different fields and data stuff in there. So it is just amazing how quickly can you run through it, right? So, okay, so let's kind of start from the beginning. One of the things that I found with Streamlit that I didn't like, so I'm coming from a web development background, and I'm used to be able to really quickly just go right click, inspect, and in here look for class or an ID for one of these elements. And they are, I guess it's part of React, where the class names and there are pretty much no IDs, and the class names are complete mumbo jumbo. There is nothing clean, nothing clear that you can find. So it's very hard from that standpoint to just basically adjust the interface. So you got to find the CSS, the CSS element, and you find all these weirdly named classes that you got to work with and try to adjust and do a lot of this stuff. So that's one thing that I didn't like. But in the same time, it allows you to really quickly add the style to the page. And when you do that, you're able to modify pretty much everything, you know. So that's kind of like a drawback, but at the same time, it's pretty nice as well. So here, just easily, just kind of those are the variable declarations. I'm loading the data file, and then just this is where I'm just gonna save the screenshots and other page information that I'm asking you to save. These are basically for their data sets, categories and subcategories that they wanted to display under here, categories and subcategories. And they're just kind of connected to one another. So for women's wear, you'd have certain categories that are specific for women's wear. Same for menswear, footwear, and everything. So that's what these are in here. And then one other kind of like cute little thing is that you can display emojis throughout the headers, titles, pretty much in any text output. You can also add a little emoji to it. So when you have this amount of data and you're just kind of like looking at it all, it's a lot easier to have some sort of an icon that helps draw your eye to some of the elements, right? So that's why I kind of liked having the ability to add all these emojis to the page. So that's a kind of like a very neat detail that they've added. So, oops, I went all the way to the bottom now. Right, so those are the emojis. And now these are kind of the same thing. Pricing columns, those are the values that can be displayed within a pricing column. And then in here, I'm just kind of using these, oh my God, these arrays basically as helpers to display the data in columns, right? So I have the screenshot and the logo. I have them as kind of set in these special columns. The UI ignore, there are a few other backend columns that are not necessarily needed here in the UI. So those are, I'm just hiding them. And then depending on the column, so I have, so for pricing, I need this different type of UI element. So for here, I just need to be able to have a multi-select. So that's why, that's kind of like how I am just building all those by passing the type of just kind of creating a list with the column names that would need multi-selects in this case, and here radio buttons, right, for sustainability and a few other things. So I have these those columns in there. So that way, it's going to be a lot easier when I'm actually showing the whole list of elements. You'll see in a bit. Now, this kind of thing with a session state is very important for the way Streamlit works. So basically, every time you're making a change to the page, it's like in a normal web page, it's reloading that page. So it forgets everything that was in there before, right? So it would forget if I would go to fifth right now, to the fifth row in our data set, basically, before it would get to this number 5, it would reset everything, it would reload the page from scratch, and it would go to 0 in a normal case. So that's why they've implemented this kind of session state, that it's a big object where you can add all your information. And this is this session state object that I'm kind of having here on the side. And in there, I'm just going to put all my elements in everything that I need to know. And the most important one is this ID of the page that I'm at, because everything derives from that. So, so that way I know that I'm on ID 5, then I can go get that specific row from the database and fill up all this information in all the fields in the UI. And then when I am basically submitting, update the data, that it's gonna rewrite that row and just basically make sure that the data stays displayed the way it's the way it's supposed to. Because when you click any button or you have any kind of action that you interact with the page, like I was saying earlier, it resets everything. So that's why it's very important to work with a session state object. They have another option to do similar things like this where you are caching the data. I didn't get into that much, and it still seems to have some bugs from what I was reading, so I kind of avoided it for now. The other thing that you can do with Streamlit is actually have multi-page apps. So for example, you would just load this one and you would have, let's say before this page, you would have another page where you can actually choose your data set. So you can choose data set, or maybe you can choose a different type of UI. And from there, you can actually go and having this session state moving between pages allows you to pass data from the page that you started on to the next page. So it's a very important concept. And they have in their documentation, they have, I mean, their documentation is amazing. It's super easy to work with. They break down all the details, and they have these knowledge base with tutorials, including kind of like with the session state basics. They have quite a lot of information about it in all these videos. And then you can find what was it? Probably the API reference, the state management. You can have all the information here, how to deal with it and everything. Add to the session state, remove from session state. It's pretty straightforward. It's an extremely easy way to work with. So yeah, okay. So that's basically what I'm doing is when I am initializing the page, I am adding it. So in case it's not already in the session state, I initialize it as 0, right? So that's the first time you load the page. And then throughout the app, when I am, let's say when I am clicking here on the plus button or the previous button, now that I'm running 2 unique functions that would, where is it? IDX increase and IDX decrease, that allow me to basically update the session state. So, which is another function which is defined. Let me find it. Okay, right next. So basically, when I click on that IDX increase button, it would just basically take the session if the session state's less than the shape. Oh, so this is basically, sorry, this is here to make sure I'm not going above the 1667. That's the amount of rows total in the data set, right? So basically that stops it from doing that, and it just kind of like adds if it's less, then it adds the +1 and calls the update session state, which will actually set the session state to that column. So yes, so it gets that, and well, it sets it up in here, and then it updates the column as well. actually the row that's dealing with. So that's for the session state, right? And then here, again, like in any normal app, I'm loading the data first, and then I am setting up the current row as this, just basically the row based on the ID that I'm at, right? This IDX here. Then in order to just kind of add sidebars and other things, all you have to do is specify. So here, this one allows me to add a sidebar. If I would say just st.title, it would automatically be added to the central area, right? To the just kind of core of the page. But if I do it, when I pass the sidebar, it will just kind of know automatically that it's a sidebar. And you can do that in any place. So right now, right here, I'm dealing with it at this line, but then later down the road, I'm going to add more stuff to the sidebar, like here. I'm adding the session state object. So it keeps in mind that, I mean, it not necessarily keeps in mind, but allows you to have working with columns and sidebars and other elements at any point within your code. Once you define them, it's just kind of like very easy to just kind of go and add more stuff to it. So you don't have to just try to really go crazy in your code to adapt to that, right? So pretty much functionality-wise, right? Let's kind of talk a little bit about what you can do with it. So they're allowing you to have this kind of like just kind of, how do they call them? They have like the little chunks of code, blocks, sorry, kind of blocks, right? Or elements. And you can use, you have different types of blocks that you can work with. So you have this write blocks where you can actually output text, output just output text, output markdown, and you can also output HTML. In them, you can also add data frames and other things, but they have more information, more specific types of blocks for that. So different types of just kind of text elements like markdown, title, header, subheader. So these are just basically allowing you to have a nice layout that you can work with, and just kind of layout and hierarchy that would work, right? The same thing, code block, latex, divider, it's one of the big ones. And then they have a lot of third-party components that you can just kind of go and load them and use them. So that's kind of like a nice big community that they have that allow you to do a lot of this stuff. Just kind of find components and use them. You can also build your own components, but I haven't gotten into that at all yet. So those are kind of for the text elements. Then for data, you can add data frames. You can add data editor, basically, which allows you to edit the actual data frame and then kind of save it back. Different columns configurations that you can set up, different columns. We'll talk a little bit about columns later. Tables, they have these predefined metrics that kind of show you the data pre-formatted like that, or you pass a title, like degree number, and then ups and down. So some of these are useful, some not as much. Then you can pass dictionaries and JSONs, different grids, and you can use maps with volume, which is quite nice. Then different charts. They have quite a lot of options when it comes to charts, and they're pretty awesome. So it's a lot of this kind of stuff in here. Input widgets. So you can actually, the regular buttons, but you can also add downloads, download files and other things, toggle buttons, multi-selects. You just kind of, I'm using a few of them. Date input, time input for specific unique things that you need. File uploader that just basically you can upload your file. I originally had that one, but I kind of commented it out. Then you can actually input your camera, and there are also a lot of kind of like image ones, like the ones that I'm using and stuff. So media elements, those are the image, audio, video, and then kind of like I haven't looked much into these. Oh, these are third party, sorry. So you can do image comparison and other things. Then layouts. So this is what I want, kind of like I was talking a little bit earlier. You create a sidebar just by saying st.sidebar, right? Columns, the same thing. You just pass the columns where you say column 1, column 2, it's st columns 2. You can also say, you can pass a list, let's say 0.1, comma 0.9, which would make 2 columns, the first one 10%, the other one 90%, right? So you can add your numbers. If you pass a list with that, it will just create those columns that way, or you can say a number and it will split the space evenly if you pass a number. So if you do 2 columns, it's going to be 50-50. If it's 3 columns, it's whatever, 33.3, 33.3, 30.3, right? You can do tabs, where you're able to just kind of tap between the elements, like a accordion expander, containers, if you want to gather some chunk of the information within a container, empties, I guess, for spacings and stuff. So there are a few other things like the chat message, chat inputs, status, like just progress bar, a lot of really cool things that you can actually do. And these are for execution. I haven't used them, but I'm not entirely sure for the stop and the rerun. But forms are quite awesome, because if you look at this interface that I have here, pretty much all the data in this, the important data, basically, let me just, data that can be updated. So whatever I selected here, all these fields are within a form. And the beauty of it is that I can click only one button and update everything, right? So it already has that functionality built in. Otherwise, you would pretty much have to have some sort of a kind of like, you can do, they already have it where if I change some of this data, I can just hit enter and it would save it, right? So if I do that, if I go to the 6th one and then I come back, it saved the data, right? So you can do that one by one. But the beauty of it is that with a form, you can change this, then you can change here, add some more stuff in here, and then when you hit update, it's gonna push them all, right? So makes it a lot easier from that standpoint. And it's actually I like it. I like it because it's just pretty much more, how do I say it? It's just like all like a compartmentalized in a way, and aggregated together into one operation rather than multiple. So what was I? Okay. So basically, right here, we're starting to actually add the UI element. So this go-to, it's a number input that I'm using. So this is my number input here that allows me to go through the elements, that I'm passing a title for it. And I'm setting up, because it's a number, I can set up a min value and a max value, right? And I'm using this. This is what I was kind of like a little bit, I was talking a little bit in the beginning for the next or the previous element to not allow it to pass. So those are kind of be dictated by the data frame that I have. Then this key basically is the label that would be passed, and it's actually the key in this session state object dictionary, basically. So for this specific number input, the key is IDX. And automatically, if I change it, it will automatically update it in the state object. The same way if I'm changing, if I'm going to a different page and I'm loading, it will know to load that specific key, right? So when I click on next here, when I click to go to 6, initially saves it as a 6, then in the session state, then reloads the page. And when it reloads the page, it looks in the session object, finds the number 6, and because it found that number 6, starts loading everything from that specific row in the data frame, right? So that's kind of the beauty of this. So you just pass a key, and you pass a key and everything works. The other nice thing about this is that now you saw that I kind of changed it by mistake. It always tells you that the source file has changed. So while you're developing, it's very easy to see the changes that your code are generating. So right now it's right there, right? So I have the option to rerun it manually, or I can set it up as always rerun. So when I hit always rerun, it's gonna, every time I save, it's gonna reload the page, which I save continuously, so I don't usually do that. What I usually do is I just hit rerun whenever I want to see what my change has done, right? So, but it's kind of nice to have that connectivity between your development environment and the actual UI. So, okay, so basically this label visibility is just, that's all there is, to just hide or show the label above the field. I just didn't want to show it. I didn't have enough room on the UI, and I was trying to get as much of the screen within the UI without extra kind of no needed information, useless information. So the same thing. This is the row that it's getting loaded, and then here we're having all basically the core of the UI. I have this form set up, and it's working really nice with the with context, right? So you're just saying with st.form, and every time you need to pass an element in here, you don't actually have to specify st.form, right? It just automatically knows that it's in there. So right here, I'm having columns. So remember how I was telling earlier that I have col 1, col 2, and I just pass a list with 70% and 30%. So if you look at the UI, basically I have this kind of 2 columns, or 1, that's the 70%, and then on the screenshot side, that's the third column, that's the col 2, right? And now what I noticed is that you can do only 2 nested columns. So I was able to do these other 2 columns here to split up the title from the sustainability. But if I would want to split it one more time, it doesn't allow you to. So that's another kind of like a weird little thing where you can have only one nested set of columns, right? So, okay, so I jumped a little bit, but this is the button. This is the red button up here that would allow me to update the data. So for a form, you must have a button, a form submit button. They don't work otherwise. So it's gonna, if I'm kind of commenting this one out, it's gonna throw an error saying that you must have a form submit button. And just basically, it knows what to do with it. All I'm having to do, I mean, you'll see later down the road that if submitted right here. So if submitted, it's gonna go in through all the elements in here in the UI within the form, and if it's not in the UI ignore column, so those underscore columns that they're not needed, I'm just updating the current row, and then I am kind of setting it up in the data frame. I'm setting it up at the current ID, this current row that got updated with the data from the interface. So anytime I'm kind of changing anything here, when I click the button, that information is going to be collected and added to the row and pass the row back into the data frame. And then just because I'm dealing with a CSV right now, and it's only one place that it's this one, it's working and it's pretty fast, I just save that CSV to file all the time. So that way, it's just if the app crashes or something happens, I have the latest data. So you can set this one up to actually write to a database, and that way you can have multiple people working with it. Currently, with this format, it's only one person that's going to be able to write, right? But they just did it for one person, so they don't want to kind of add extra development time for that. So the other kind of nice thing is that unlike in HTML, it's a lot easier to just kind of get things out of the order, right? So in here, I'm starting by defining this column 2 with the text inputs, right? And the images and everything. So I'm starting with that column, and it automatically knows to parse all this Python code and generate all the HTML and the JavaScript and the CSS that's needed to just basically display it. So it's just from that standpoint, it's extremely flexible, right? So here, I'm just basically I'm checking it to show the logo URL. So I'm checking it to see if the data, if actually there is a data in there. So I'm using this logo URL equals string, because NAND type in pandas, it's float. So if it's a string, that's kind of like my way of figuring out, hey, there's data in there or not. And then the row starts with HTTP. So it's an URL actually, and I mean, otherwise might be a wrong data. Then just basically put this logo URL to show it. And then again, this is a small divider to allow me to actually basically split the UI into what I need. So, and then now, like I was saying, these are the nested columns. The inner column 1 and the inner column 2, right, are just going to be columns within this column 1. So that allows me to just kind of go through. Sorry, I was just kind of looking into the chat, and I saw a message, and I'm like, okay, what did I miss? Okay, so inner call 1, inner call 2. So basically, I'm going through all the columns in the data frame right now. And that's kind of like the beauty of this kind of Streamlit and Python, because I have a data frame, and right now I'm going to go through each one of those columns. I don't have to set it up specifically for, oh, if this is the title, put a title in here. If this is the subtitle, put a subtitle in there. I just kind of like, it's a lot easier to run a loop through all the columns. Now, I'm just kind of taking the columns, and I'm creating a clean name from the column name. So I have underscores, and I have underscores and lowercase everywhere. So I'm removing the underscores, and I'm creating the title, right? Title case, basically. So I'm creating that clean name to be able to actually add it to the label. of it, right? So in here, and I have a few elif cases because I need, for example, for the descriptions, I will need a bigger text block, right? For pricing, this is going to be a multi-select, right? For year founded, it's the same thing. It's just like a normal text, normal text, normal text. So most of these are normal text. Then I have, again, the multi-selects, and the same here for all these other ones. And then in here, I have sustainability, which are the radio buttons. And then I also have URLs. So these are, I want them to show them with different icons. And I want them to show them for the social media. I want them to show them with the actual link, right? If they have one. So that's where all these if cases are coming into. So for the first case where I have descriptions, so for the description about Facebook and LinkedIn, I would just basically have this emoji of writing hand, and then I'm going to use a text area block, right? Text area element. And I'm going to put the label of the emoji plus the clean name that I've cleaned up here. And then as a value, I'm just kind of using the current row and the column name, right? Because I'm just going through the columns here. It's very easy to use, kind of like to pull the data, create the names. So I'm doing everything dynamically based on that column name, right? So, and I kind of specify this key, remember, is the one that would actually be stored in a session state object. So that way, description about will end up being a key here in this object. So it's very easy to use the column names of your data set to generate pretty much all the UI without pretty much any manual input besides kind of giving it certain cases. So the same thing right now for pricing. If the column is pricing, I'm going to use a multi-select. And for the multi-select, I'm just going to pass as the default elements the ones that are existing within that current row in the pricing column. And the same, the key that's going to be stored into the session state is the column name. And that way, the value of this is going to be stored in there. Same for categories. Categories, this one is a multi-select, but I had to do some kind of more working in here to get the values. So it just basically, a lot of the code that's happening in here is just massaging the data. It's not necessarily the UI. That's kind of like the amazing thing. UI, it's extremely easy and just kind of moves out of the way and allows you to kind of to do everything that you need. So the same thing, I'm creating all the values. This one is for subcategories, right? So I'm checking for the columns that start with a subcat, and then for each and every one of them, I work by figuring out again. This is, like I was saying, this is splitting the names and getting the categories, and based on each category has its own set of subcategories. So this is basically what's happening in there, trying to figure out so for example, here, women's wear, right? I have the subcat women's wear. And if I can just go and choose, let's say, home, right? The moment I choose home, this is a thing that I kind of not necessarily like about it, because in order to display the subcategory, I need to update the data. And once I update the data, now I have this drop down for a multi-select for the subcategories for home. So this is one thing that I didn't like about it, and I didn't find a workaround, but it still works. So you just got to save your categories first, and then you can just kind of go into the subcategories. The same way if I remove, let's say, all of this, let's say I remove them all. Now, if I update the data, they're all gone. All the subcategories are gone because they're dependent on, they're just kind of conditional logic, basically, that if you have the category, then you should have the subcategory. Otherwise, you don't, right? So this is pretty much all that code it's for. And then for these ones, for the domain and website, I wanted to have this kind of like set of unique links, right? And then I'm not sure what I've done with the about and what are the about? Oh no, because these all, sorry, all four of them. So this is website, and then website about and website contact. They all start with website. So that's what's happening for the other three, right? So I have the first one for the domain, and then the next one is for the next three, right? So that allows me to just kind of display them all. And then social media the same way. I wanted to have different icon. So that's basically generating all the fields and everything for the social media, right? And then these are for the UIs, for the radios, sorry. And basically we have three of them. And this is for, what was it? Sorry, there's another chunk in here for the killed record and if it was newly added or not. So that's what the underscore part is. So this chunk is for these ones here, which are kind of, in a way, semi-hidden columns, right? But that's kind of like how I had them set up. So that's why it was needed to have that split. But the same way, options are yes and no. Just basically create a radio in this column 2, and then in there I'm just kind of passing the clean name, the options. The index is the one that's selected, so it's the one that's in there, and then again the key that gets stored within the session state, right? And then I have another text input. So this basically, this line right there creates all these other ones. So like the year founded, employees, address, country, email, phone, everything that's just simple or the same, title, subtitle as well, right? Because these are all the text fields. So if I would have had a data frame that had only simple text fields, this whole UI would have been done with pretty much one line of code and a little bit of the kind of submitting in the beginning. So that's why I'm just kind of like, I was blown away by it when I started digging into it. So makes it super easy to dynamically generate UI. So that's pretty much it. This is all the user interface right there for the core area, right? So that makes it extremely useful. So do you guys have any questions?
I do.
Then go ahead.
Does it work with something like a JSON structure, which
Yeah.
if it were just flat would probably be equivalent to a CSV, but if it's got some nesting, like an array of sub-objects?
So you got to think of it as being Python, right? So your data is a dictionary, a JSON file, right? So it's up to you to modify it and pass that data exactly how you want, right? So if you have, let's say if you have a nested dictionary and you have into one of them, you have one key, and underneath that you have a list of elements, right? You can basically say that if that for that key, run a loop and create a text field or a field for each and every one of those nested or elements in the list, right? So it's up to you. It's just how and what you're doing. That's the part that I like the most, and it's very forgiving. Like I was saying earlier, you can start with a column 2 and then put the data in the column 2, then come back in here, then add some stuff to the sidebar, then get back to the core area. It's just like once you set up like the columns and the sidebars and all, it's very easy to reuse them all throughout the rest of the code. So it's very forgiving to create layouts and add data and work with it.
So it looks like it's generating all the HTML on the server and sending the page down. So it's not like an SPA or a single page app. It's more like it refreshes the entire page when you make minor
yes,
changes.
yes, that's kind of like one of the drawbacks. It refreshes all the page, and I fought with it for, I would say, about 3-4 days, and I was just kind of going crazy because it was not working the way I was expecting. And until I kind of figured out that you have to have everything loaded in order. The moment you get out of that order, kind of everything goes to hell. So you got to be very clear when you generate the structure, and you need to get your data in the beginning, then start adding right away into that session state. The moment you add to the session state, a lot of what's kind of coming after gets just basically solved, right? But without the session state, go ahead.
So it's not like converting your UI commands to the JavaScript that runs in the browser to redisplay when the session state changes. It's generating the HTML on the server.
It's generating the HTML on the server, yes, every time. And it's just generating everything and dumps everything to display.
But,
So reruns.
But did you mention earlier that it uses React?
Yes, it's basically React on the kind of like the interface, the UI part.
Okay.
So,
but what I was assuming when I heard React that it was kind of like a single page, that it was going to refresh just the components.
I haven't done any React, so
I don't know much, but I think that's the kind of like the main selling point of it.
Well, actually, you're right, because being React, I would assume that it's not done on the server side, it's done on the client side. So pretty much, I would assume that on the server side generates the JavaScript, and then when the page loads, it runs that JavaScript and displays everything. But that's an assumption. I'm not familiar with React.
But you
And
definitely see it reloading. When you change something, you see it reloading everything.
Right, and it's just like if you look here, it shows up top, rerunning. Every time I move it, if you look at the top corner right above my mouse, it's like running. So, but it's just like it reruns pretty much everything that was on the page, reloads everything that was on the page.
that may be a side effect of you are pushing a change back to the server and then rerunning all your code that generates the UI, as compared with just instead of just sending a new status object back to the client.
Right, so right now, if I am just commenting that and just basically rerun, it's going to display it without any of those fields.
Cool.
Right. So it automatically, automatically converts the Python into some server code that most likely generates JavaScript that would be reloaded on the UI.
So that you don't know React is essentially a short statement of the beauty of this whole system.
Okay. Right. Yes, it did. It did. So, right. So I'm just writing Python, and that's what I was saying. It's very unobtrusive. It's just basically, I don't even know how to say it, but it's really out of the way. The whole JavaScript, the whole website, it's completely out of the way. All you're doing is logic, and based on your logic, you figure out what and how you want to transform your data, and you just pass it. And you use some fields that allow you to do it in just kind of like super easy. So yeah, it's quite amazing from that standpoint.
Very nice.
Yeah. Any other question? Okay, I'll continue. So basically, this last part here, it's more about just kind of going to the URL and just interacting with Selenium, right? So here I'm just kind of using when I launch the page, I add the driver, the Selenium web driver, into the session state. That way, when I move from page to page, it still maintains it. So then I can work with this session state driver just like you would work with a normal just Selenium driver. So I'm able to go to the page that I want to go to, save the screenshot here, the same thing, go to the page that I wanted to go to. And then for Facebook, just basically this one, well, so first I need to log in. Where was it? So I must have a function that allows me to log in. So that's the, okay. So here. So this is the login where I'm using the driver to just basically go to facebook.com, pass the user and the pass, just find the element or whatever. Yeah, get these ones from the file that I store them in, then find the email field, pass it in, send the keys, put the password in, and then just kind of log in. So this basically is going to log into Facebook. This is going to log into LinkedIn. And once I'm in there, I can work with those other buttons where it would just kind of like go to the Facebook page that's found in here, right? Facebook page. It would go to that page, and the same thing for LinkedIn. And then when it scrapes, it looks for certain data that's specific to Facebook and tries to find it and just kind of pre-fill some of this field. And the same thing from LinkedIn. So those are things that those buttons do. So basically, this is what's happening in here, where if it's a certain type of a page, gets the current URL, so it gets to that specific page, loads the page source, and then, so this is for LinkedIn, right? And then saves the source as a local file in case later on it's needed. Then it's a lot easier to just kind of load the file from local than just kind of all the time go and get it. So this is that part. Then parses the data, and then with kind of like using Beautiful Soup to find certain chunks of text, and then gets that description. So it finds this description from LinkedIn and passes it to the session state, which in turn fills it up in here, right? And then messages. So here what I'm doing, because I'm trying to extract some data that's from that text, I'm just using OpenAI to just pass to get the number of employees, to get the year founded, right? So I'm just using the OpenAI API to pass the text from LinkedIn and extract this data and get it back into a JSON, right? To be able to fill that up. So I get here the response message, makes it into a JSON, and then basically find employees, LinkedIn data, employees. So this one is going to return a JSON basically back with employees and founded. So I'm using that to pass it and save it. And the same thing for, so this is LinkedIn. So this one just takes to LinkedIn and does all that. And this is Facebook. So pretty much the same type of functionality for Facebook. The same thing. Going to the page, loading the data, storing that data, and then just basically parsing for certain, for address, for email, phone number, price. That's kind of like selected from that. And then parse that data and save it. So that's what I was saying. A lot more of this code is just the extra functionality, right? And the same here for the contact page to save it for later usage, the same way for the about page. So now basically this is the last chunk with the sidebar where I'm having these, where are they? The screenshot, the launch website gets screenshot, and some of these ones, but right now that functionality it's kind of turned off. So again, I'm doing it again with sidebar, right? Even though I had sidebar defined earlier to be able to add the title and the current working the file, the working file, and all that information, I'm able to say again with sidebar, do this. So that's what I was kind of saying. You can break it down and keep adding all this information at different parts within your Python code, which makes it very flexible. You don't have to force your Python code to match the basically Streamlit's needs, right? It's a lot easier to just kind of like, hey, this is my Python code, and I'm inserting some Streamlit here, some Streamlit here, Streamlit there, and make it all work, right? So here I have this launch website that sends the go-to URL. So here they have callbacks, right, for buttons, where you can just say that when this one is clicked, run this function. And this one go to URL is just basically, right, it's up top there, or no, where was it? Go to URL. Just basically just takes the driver to URL. That's it. So you just have driver, get, and then passes the URL. I mean the current URL. So the same thing, get screenshot, like I was kind of showing that one earlier, just gets the screenshot and saves it. The same about page, contact. So these are the UIs for the functions that I was talking about earlier. The same thing here for FB login, and then LinkedIn login. The same thing, run these functions that would do all that. Go to all those. Yeah, so these are kind of like some extra things, but I have them disabled as true at this point. I mean, in this phase. And the same thing, add record, new record, and basically remove record here. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. And then in order to show the session state, it's just I have a flag that if it's in a kind of like if I'm using this as in a debugging mode, run and show the session state just to be able to see what's happening. And it's very easy. You just kind of say session state up st.session state, and that's gonna display it. So that's all there is. It's just amazing how easy it is to work with. But like I was saying, it's amazing for prototypes and kind of small production. I wouldn't use this for any kind of big kind of customer facing interface kind of like project. But in order to develop and get started is amazing. You just get prototype extremely quickly, get it done. Once you have that one, once you have the prototype running, then you can work with some other UI kind of tool and just build it from there. So that's all I have. So what do you guys think? Questions? Cool. Okay, thanks a lot, guys.